There we go. Okay. You have the roll as of now.
Yep.
I need a motion to approve the minutes of 2/16/17.
Move to approve.
Motion, go ahead.
Move to approve the minutes, December 16th.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? 6-0. Public speak. Anyone here from the public who wants to speak? Okay. CPA account balances. Wanted to ask under this if the funding, I see in here that we have $596,912 remaining. So the pending dollars, which is the money for the town hall that was approved by the council,
It was
isn't
approved
it?
last night, but.
But is that already deducted from the, does 596 include that deduction?
No.
So there's only-
596 is what's free to spend.
I think you misunderstood me. The 206 is already accounted for, so there's 596 left.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. All right. I wanted to report that the council had a great debate last night. I'm going to throw this out there because I was very upset last night. We had a debate on the City Hall, and one of the members, let you watch and decide who it was, decided to throw out there was some concern because, you know, the schools are, there's a new school being planned, that such a large project as the City Hall project would be in competition with that. And I correctly pointed out that CPA funds can't be used to build a school. And then one of my colleagues threw out there in debating the subject, because he wanted a business plan and everything. Of course, all of that was available. Homework is something some people don't do. Anyway, the comment he made was that perhaps the CPA tax should be reduced in order to help fund the schools.
Oh, my.
Oh, I went ballistic. It's a competition that is of no good for this city, and I want this committee, you're all on this committee because you believe in the CPA, I'm sure. You know what it's done for this community. To have the tax reduced would kill that project, because if we're going to bond out of the CPA, we're going to need a funding revenue stream that's fairly consistent. You reduce it to 1%, you're going to have a lot less money coming in.
We might lose our state money also.
There you go. So if that's out there, whether that was just him putting it out there for the moment or not, I want this committee to know that that's something that was brought up. And I don't know if it's out there as a way of, because that's a huge override if that happens, placating taxes or whatever. I'll fight. Ever since I've joined the committee, I've learned so much about what good the CPA does, and I'll fight tooth and nail to prevent that. And I'd like you guys to be on board, because if that becomes an issue, I'd like y'all to show up to the school building committee and say, no. Seriously. And I'm glad Jess is here to hear that, because that's scary.
It's scary.
But I wanted you to know it was there. It's public record. It's on, you know, it's in the council meeting. We convinced the person to vote in favor. It was voted in favor 6-0 to move forward with that design. And you all voted unanimously to support it, so I was very happy about that. But still, that coming out, I don't know, got me upset. Anyway, that's just a comment. So the account balance is 596 is still remaining after we've spent quite a bit this year. We've spent $753,000
Plus the 206.
plus the 206, so almost $1 million already this year. And we've had 596 left, which means we have a good revenue stream. It's good for the city. City officials, you're here for the Conservation Commission, okay. Off the Map called me. They're very frustrated with the Historic Commission's lack of meetings, as I am. Mr. Ford wrote me a letter, said he wouldn't, email said he wouldn't be here because of that. Now, in my opinion, and Jamie, you correct me if I'm wrong, we can act on the Ford, on that, because it's already historic designated, the
Courthouse.
courthouse. It's already on the National Register. So if we wanted to act on that, we could. So in my opinion, it's just me, I'd like to invite them back and we have a vote at the next meeting on whether or not we want to support any funding for that. And we could do it also with any caveat in there, for instance, that they receive the bond issue being released, et cetera. We talked a lot about that. Is the committee okay with that, having that debate and vote at the next meeting, regardless of this local historic commission opinion? John, how do you feel, your historic commission representative?
Yeah, just for the record, I think everybody here knows, I'm really disappointed that the commission hasn't met and would urge the members to manage to meet, but in lieu of a meeting, I support the motion.
I believe it is appropriate, though, when there's no historic designation, for instance, the off-the-map request, we can act. Because there is a commission, it's on the books, and somebody who doesn't like our decision could sue us because we didn't do that, and that's happened in other communities. So I think we're gonna have to wait and see on that one. I intend to talk to the mayor about, I know there's stuff in the charter, if you don't go to meetings, you can be removed from the committee. And if meetings can't be held, we have to start over. And if there's a seven-member committee designated in the charter, I might request through the council that administrative code change to move it to 5, so you have an easier time of meeting. But we can't act on historic preservation action without local commission's recommendation. So both of those things aren't coming, and I would like Mr. Ford told to come to the next meeting. We're gonna debate it and decide on our own.
Do we want to do a draft funding agreement or?
Yeah, do we want to do that? That's a good idea. I think we mentioned that I would like any donation tied to the bond being released. Anybody else remember what else they wanted on
That was the big one, making it conditional
on the bond?
on the bond.
And since they have phases, I wouldn't go more than maybe a third of his recommendation for each city and town. We can debate the amount at the time, but I think, what was ours, 135,000?
That was
Something like that.
the total ask, yeah.
Well, I would do a third of that at most on this round. And that would be,
So Northampton's done 200 out of the 235?
260,000.
but there's still two more, isn't there
It's
still?
135 and they're 235.
I understand there's another phase on this, right?
There's at least one more, probably two.
That's my recommendation.
Well, I don't want to go too high for other reasons, see what the blowback is from the community. But if we are going to do it, let's keep it to a third and very much pending on that bond. So let's write that up and have that ready to go, and you can even email it to Mr. Ford. This is what we're thinking right now. So at the next meeting, we'll
Is it contingent on the whole bond? The
Well-
bond itself is all or none, is that right? Or?
They
I
can
don't fully
release,
understand
they
the-
can release as much as they want. I mean,
And my recollection was that they could spend what they had gathered with or without the bond, but that's just from memory. Is that right?
Right, so they asked, I think, something like the state has bonded four million, and DCAM is sitting on that and isn't able to authorize use of that money yet for some complicated political movement.
But the money that they gathered from the towns.
Is separate from what was
from that, so
bonded.
they could-
but I think his reason for going to all the CPA committees was to try and get something back to Rosenberg and say, look, we've got this much support as a way of leveraging them opening that
If there's
up.
local support, he has a better chance of getting it.
Yeah, so if we tie, they don't get the money unless there's a bond release, we're safe in a sense. And if they release only 1/3 of the bond, we're only doing 1/3 of of our allotments. Makes sense. Let's keep it to that. Okay. Ecadale Orchard Project. I read it. Sounds good to me.
So, this is a request coming from the Conservation Commission. This is a piece of land that was acquired partially using CPA funds. It's the small kind of sliver, if you're driving down Park Hill and you see the community garden, right ahead of that is the orchard. And it sits between, the community garden and Park Hill Orchard, the privately held orchard. This has been a piece of land that in the 5 years that I've been here, the commission has talked about, because it's been recognized that there's trees that are diseased that need to come down. There has expressed concern by the property owners at Park Hill Orchard that these trees, their diseases could end up into their crop, and that they're using certain herbicides to basically maintain their orchard in order to prevent any contamination. And so Jessica has spent a lot of time and a lot of work coming up with a scope of work. She's met with a lot of companies to get some initial price quotes of what it would take to basically just maintain this piece of land that has been sitting there for quite some time since the city acquired it. We haven't done anything to it since we acquired it.
Could I ask, when we acquired it, was the intent to continue the orchard?
I don't know what the intent was. I think it was part of the bigger Echo Dale purchase. There's east
Oh, yeah, I
side and
remember
the
that.
west side.
Mhm.
The west side is the community garden, including this orchard, and then the east side is the larger parcel on the other side. And that was one of Trust for Public Land, had a whole fundraising effort. And so there is some small amount of funds that are set aside specifically for ongoing projects at Echo Dale because of that fundraising effort that TPL did. And so the Conservation Commission is now moving forward. They are the managers of this property, so they're moving forward with a plan of how to manage it and not just manage the trees and deal with the trees that need to come down, but how to make it more publicly accessible and how to open it up to more activity, passive recreation in that area. So if you want to talk about sort of the scope and the information you've gathered.
Sure. So initially, we were hoping that we could preserve it as an orchard as is. And I met with Russell Grain from Park Hill and then a few other people who were orchardists or understand apple trees. And the recommendation from all of them was that you can't really restore this many, it's 60 to 80 trees. And it would be really hard to get them all back to health. And the cost that it's, in the meantime, causing the Park Hill Orchard makes it so that it's actually better to remove most of the trees. So that was sort of surprising to us. But it turns out that it's actually much less expensive to get rid of the trees. And so the part of the estimate for this project would be the tree removal, and that would cost around up to $4,000. And then we would want to brush hog underneath where the trees are to clear that out. And that would be an additional $1,000. There are approximately 6 trees that Russell helped us identify that are of interesting breeds, rare breeds, that are in decent enough health that it would be worth pruning those. And so that would be a 3-year project to get those back to be productive, and to make sure that they're healthy. And that part of the project would cost $4,000.
Is it worth it to keep those trees, you think? For apple production?
I think the goal is less that they would be hugely productive. I mean, I think they would become productive after 3 years of pruning, but that they would also be an aspect of an educational piece and a historical piece to
In a
preserve.
future phase, maybe, of how this property might be used.
Yeah. So those are the big aspects of the first part. If the intention of further down the road, we would have now these historic apple trees. And so this isn't part of this grant project, but that there would be a trail through the property and that there would be an opportunity for people to learn more about fruiting plants, and that it could be an educational kind of facility and also recreational opportunities. And that's what it sounds like then Park Hill, the abutter, is interested in. And there have been other people from the public who come to us about that property because they realize that it is a resource in our community and would like to be able to use it. So the one other piece of this project that we're asking for is help with invasive species management. So we would have a invasive species management plan drawn up, but there would also be community volunteer work to help remove the invasives that are there, which are multiflora rose, honeysuckle, and barberry. That's
And just sort of, again, the big context, last year, 2 years ago, we had the Conway School who did a trails project up for this section of the city to look at the different pieces of land, because it's one of the biggest chunks of protected open space in the city, contiguous. And this was one of the only pieces that really we have enough control that we could do a trail very easily. So the intent is, once we've managed it, once it's cleaned up, apply for a trails grant, work with a trails designer to put something in place. We know that there's wetlands up there, so we need to be cognizant of that in the design. But this is really to just get it to a place where we can take it to the next step to make it publicly acceptable by applying to a trails grant for that.
It looks like there's a lot more trees than the red ones that you've indicated here. That
Yeah,
aren't
so
even
this-
marked, what
Well,
happens
we
to
did a
it?
tour with Russell because he's the tree expert, and we went out and flagged a number of trees, and I went back and GPS the location of the flagged trees. So the green were definitely saves, the yellows were maybe saves, and the reds were get rid of. But we did look at every tree, so that's just kind of the ratio.
There's some trees in the middle here
We never
that,
got to those. We kind of did a loop around the whole outside of the property.
And that's where the 80 trees estimate comes from, I think, and the plan says 60 to 80 trees.
is it your intent to cut them all down, or just the ones you've marked so far?
The recommendation from Russell, and then we had K&J Tree Company come out, and they thought the best thing to do would be to remove all of them, because the pruning, in fact, would be a labor-intensive and a costly project. So there's the ones on the edge that you can see, and then a few throughout that would be worth saving.
So when you remove the tree, do you remove the stump and you make it a flat land? It's a flat space?
It's a good question
And
about
then-
the stump removal. I'm not sure if we talked about that. And again, there's wetlands there, so we need to be really careful about disturbing soils, especially. So
Sometimes we don't want to remove stumps in wetland areas, which causes erosion and messes up the wetlands themselves. So sometimes we want to cut flush with the grounds.
No? Okay.
they can decompose in the ground. It would take time.
And then maybe replanting new,
I think that's
new
the intent. We
species of
haven't really sort of
floral.
fleshed out what the next, what the design would be of the next phase. We just know that we want to have something that's publicly acceptable, accessible, maybe even ADA accessible if possible. And there's an idea of having an edible garden up there.
community gardens maybe, eventually, or not?
Well, there are quite a few plots already.
In town, yeah.
And, personally, for me, if we were to put in any more community gardens in the city, I'd like to see it downtown, rather than put in a place where people have to drive to. Somebody doesn't have a car and they have a food security issue and they're taking the bus doesn't go up to the community gardens. I'd much rather see something more in town
That's a
in
good
a
idea.
downtown location.
Yeah, I think we were thinking more of a recreational and potentially educational use for the land.
So, when this is done, it's a city property, so it would have to be city managed.
Well, the Conservation Commission is the management
They're the management.
department for it, and there is this pot of funds that, technically they are the overseers of the community garden as well. The community garden falls under the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction. There is a community garden committee, but they technically report to the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
So whether there's a new group that's developed to oversee this, who knows? We haven't figured that part out yet.
I'm just a little bit interested in the trees to be saved. Did you describe them as rare?
That's what Russell said about them. He said that the majority of these trees are, I'm pretty sure he said red delicious, like not very interesting. But there are these ones right along the edge of his property on the north side of the map. that were different species that we actually wasn't even sure what they were.
And some of the trees are in so bad a shape, that's why we selected those as to take them out, because just to get them back to, they're broken off in the middle, they're just in really rough shape, so to get them back would just be so much work in so many years, it's not worth it. Russell said to plant a new tree would be more efficient if you really wanted to have that kind of fruit or.
I was curious, I'm no expert on the subject, but my understanding was, forgive my encapsulation here, but that the way a tree that produces a desirable fruit, an apple tree, is reproduced is by, grafting
Right.
and cloning. So an apple seed doesn't grow true to the
Exactly.
same. So my understanding being that rare species of apple trees are a particularly precious thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just think it might be worth,
Finding out which breed they are.
Yeah,
I
that's-
think it would be interesting to know.
I think if the funding is approved, that we go back there with Russell, we volunteer him to go back through, we go through the whole thing and flag
Don't
everything.
volunteer him.
Yeah, we will, we will.
No,
And
he's
he's-
really invested
he's
in
really
that,
invested, I know.
actually.
He's the guy that lives next door.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And
He
he
does
wrote a
the
letter.
art of the orchard.
Yeah, and in my opinion, that's the selling point to me. We're damaging a business next door that's trying to do their own work with their own orchard, and we've got
It's a high risk for them, yeah.
invasive
High risk.
insects, anything coming,
Pesticides, molds.
everything. I think that says to me, get it done quickly. Might be city liability there, I don't know, but that's a problem. And if we're gonna turn it into open space and a recreational facility, it certainly matches CPA guidelines. And it's not a lot of money when it comes to, we just spent 200,000.
Right, it's kind of a drop in the bucket.
And there's some matching funds are there also. so
Yes, I think that's great, there's 5,000 from the commission itself. I don't think you should refer to it as a pot of funds.
Well, it's only can be used for Echodale, that's.
Really?
Yes.
There's an
that's all.
Echodale account? or
It's an
something?
Echodale account to be used only for Echodale projects. It's not a ton of money, but it's there, it's a little bit of a resource.
Well, from my opinion, once you get this done and you need funds, use that money to leverage more CPA funds.
Exactly, that's the plan.
To get it so that it is a
Right.
workable space.
And a Trails grant, I mean, between the
I know.
Trails grant, CPA funds, and the commission's small pot of money.
Anybody have any other questions? I think this is a worthwhile project, and I think it's a problem for the city to have one orchard being destroyed by property that we own.
I like the project. The long-term maintenance of this piece of property is, what's happening?
That's
Is
a
that
big-
part of what that Echodale fund
Right.
is going to be
Right.
going to?
So right now, there's 3 years of pruning that needs to happen on those trees. While that's happening, my hope is that we can move along on the Trails grant side, get a design done, and move forward. I think really it's going to be a trail and that's it. I don't anticipate it being a high maintenance, but again, while we go through that design process, we're very cognizant of that as we move forward, and so I think, that would be part of the discussion, is we want a design that makes sense and utilizes the land and is not gonna take a ton of city resources to upkeep.
Is it gonna have to be mowed or anything like that? or-
I don't know, we don't know yet. I mean, the design is, right now, it's really getting rid of the invasive, taking down the trees, spraying the trees, right? Is there a spray for the healthy trees? No, we took that out? Okay.
Oh, for the healthy trees
The
that are
healthy
pruned.
trees.
I think the pruning would be enough to
Okay.
bring down.
And then there has to be some maintenance on those trees moving forward.
Yeah.
Because we
Yes.
don't want
Well, we
them
have
to
a
turn
three-year pruning in the plan. so.
Okay.
Yeah, and the arborist who came and looked at it thought that after 3 years, it would be minimal maintenance, so that he could.
So you don't anticipate anything happening for 3 years to this land after you cut the trees down, or?
I'd like to see something move forward a little bit
Yeah.
quicker than that. I think we can continue the pruning process while the other aspect, it's my intent and hope that those trees will be incorporated into the design, so there's no reason not to move forward on the rest of it
I
while
think
there's
it
pruning
takes 3
aspect.
years to prune a tree back into at least 3 years, because you can't cut the tree in half. You need to remove pieces and keep moving it towards a final goal. You can't do all the pruning in 1 year. or we risk taking the tree out.
Here, I thought all you did was give it a little fertilizer, you have apple. All done.
No, they are a lot.
That's
And
a lot of work.
And I have to say that the commission's probably been approached by 3, at least, individuals that were interested in doing apple pruning up there. So, you know, I feel like that the pruning aspect of it itself, we could likely find a volunteer to do that. And especially if it's only 5 or 6 trees, you know?
But then it seems like there's community organizations that want to be involved.
What's that property worth?
What's it worth?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's
Nothing. It's
not
good
worth
conservation.
anything now. It's conservation land.
Yeah.
It doesn't have an assessment.
You're gonna say, it's all up it's gonna
Invaluable.
cost, let them worry about it. They're the ones
No.
that help.
The city already owns
fund-
it.
Yeah. Oh, is that right?
Getting it.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, I didn't know that.
No, I think we have commission that actively wants to see this happen, and they are, obviously, there's a volunteer part of this. Part of the budget is in-kind community volunteers. You must have a good group, so.
Yeah, and as far as.
And they want to see it happen.
The timeline would look like we would start working on the invasive species management plan soon. We can actually start working on that ahead of time. And then over the summer, we would start doing volunteer removal. Volunteers would help to remove the invasive species, and then the actual tree work couldn't happen until after the growing season and after birds migrate and things like that. Yeah, so
And
the
the
tree
brush,
removal.
the brush clearing we might wanna do when the ground is frozen,
Right,
because of the
right.
wetlands, we don't wanna be driving on wetlands with equipment.
So that would be like a late fall, winter project, starting next year, or starting, 2017, 2018. And the pruning would go on, like, this is phase 1, the pruning would go on beyond phase 1, but phase 2. So phase 1 would be the trees would all be removed, the invasive species would have a management plan, and would be actively working on that. And then phase 2 would be the trails. So the pruning would continue to happen, it wouldn't prevent the other work from happening.
Well, the funding cycle ends next May, the next meeting, so we will vote on this at the next
Okay,
meeting.
Okay.
Because that's just 5/18.
Just as much.
April's next month. Right?
5 is May,
2 months.
so I'm wrong.
Yeah, 2 meetings.
I wouldn't mind voting on this in April in order that in May it gets decided by the council so that they can move ahead in June to start working on it. I just want to hear what the committee thinks. Do we need to wait until the May cycle? I hit the wrong date, sorry. I mean, it's not, the funding cycles were designed, I think, so that big projects, hundreds of $1,000 projects, if they all come at once, you could make a decision, but this is a minor amount of money, given what we've spent, so I would be in favor of voting on it in the April meeting, so that the council could get it soon after and get this done. I mean, because we're getting into the growing season, and the bugs will be there, ready to go,
The black flies.
whatever is eating the trees.
I'm open to that, that's fine.
Fine.
This is some pretty reasonable pricing also for the work that's involved here.
Is a lot of
I'm impressed
is
with
it
the
tree
price.
cutting down by professionals, or is it all volunteers?
By
The-
professionals.
The estimate that I got was from K&J.
It's only $4,000 to cut 80 trees down?
That's what they said.
I'm gonna hire these guys.
Right.
Cut 2 down, let me see, 2 trees.
No, I was really surprised. I said,
I got 2 trees to cut down.
To me,
And the
it
brush
seems
hog.
like it's a great project and.
Brush
I really
clearing
wanna
one
use the
day,
phrase
$1,000?
Low hanging fruit. I just.
Can't figure out a way to work it in.
Yeah, exactly, so.
Okay, Mr.
Of all the
Adam.
projects out there, this is,
Well, and you-
Can I
Drop in the
interrupt?
apple bucket.
We just moved into the Genesis story here. Okay, we will meet next, you should come, we will have a contract ready to be signed and voted on for next meeting.
Do you have any questions or any additional information you feel like you need between now and then?
I want to compliment you on the
When's the
very
first
beautiful
apple pie coming?
presentation. Jessica, did you put this presentation?
She worked on it, I edited it.
Yeah, it was a joint, Justin.
Very nicely done.
Justin Best show.
I mean, for me, it's a lot easier to vote on things that have a lot of information already there, because it removes questions.
When is the next meeting?
April,
Third
Third.
Thursday of April.
It's a
April
typical-
20th.
It's a typical Pioneer Valley planning.
What about
No, it's a typical Pioneer Valley planning presentation. Everything is right to this,
Who, my son?
Tell you he wants
I know
something.
how to
don't
write
know
a
what it is,
grant,
but he
that's
wants
all.
it.
Harry has been speaking so highly of you, Jess. I
Man, I
can't
don't know
wait.
what I did.
I'm gonna call and see what did he want?
I don't know what I did. April 20th, is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Is that Earth Day? How appropriate.
Oh. Wow. So you-
Perfect. It is okay.
How appropriate.
Let's go green.
Have a good evening.
Thank you so much.
Let's cut some trees down for a day.
Think of it more as saving the remaining
We're hoping
trees.
that's a long-term benefit.
Can you burn apple wood?
I'm sure you can smoke it, right? Isn't it
So
part of
maybe we
barbecue
could,
smoking?
could it be possible that they're looking at saving all of this wood? That's why it's a cheap thing, they're gonna sell it?
That's fine.
Possible.
That's
You're
fine,
taking
it's
away
actually
the dead
priced
trees,
out.
I
right?
have a
Yeah.
neighbor who uses applewood to smoke the
So
petty
maybe
restaurants.
they're making.
Well, you have this
making money
applewood
off.
bacon, I guess somebody
It's
makes
really
it.
good.
It's a good price though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Bye.
right.
Have a good night.
See ya.
All I have is you all got this letter from John Mason, he didn't get his grant. So because it's a completely different project, I asked Jamie to have him come back to us with a new budget.
Yeah, so he's gonna come to the next meeting with a revised plan, a revised budget, and make a presentation.
And it has to go back to the council because it's a whole new project. They voted on a combination project, we voted on a combination project. So they're not gonna do the renovation of the entranceway and all that. They're only gonna do the stone building and use only CPA funds. There's no grant money involved. And I'm okay with that personally, but he has to start over.
Does he have to do a new application also, or just,
I think he just has to revise the current application.
Scope of work.
Scope of work has to, basically he does in a sense, because
Yeah.
it's all new. And we have to bring it back to the council.
But when it goes back to council, because the funds have already been approved, it wouldn't need to necessarily go through finance subcommittee and if you wanted the council to discuss it.
I think the council has to do that, because we voted on a project based on a grant application. And everybody always compliments CPA funding projects that have grants leveraging with the project. And now this is a pure thing, and it's the same amount of money.
Well, it might change.
If the money
He's
changes,
coming back with the new budget, it might be significantly less than what we
then he
submitted.
needs to write a letter basically requesting that the last funding request be removed, so that the new funding request can be decided. And I think we have to do that. Council has to pull it out, we have to pull it out, council has to pull it out, and then we have to put in a new. I mean, it's just a formality.
so he has to start from scratch?
I think he should, because we already voted on it based on leveraging a grant, and council voted on that, so we have to start over. Because now it's just CPA funds, and I have no problem with it, but somebody might
And
not.
it's gonna be a different project. It's gonna be a different scope.
It's gonna be, the project itself, I think, was an estimate on what the building would cost to be repaired. Now he's getting a more careful budget.
But maybe they
Well,
won't be doing some of the
the budget was a
surrounding things.
combined budget for.
Yeah, two
the-
projects.
For the entrance and the bathroom, for the design, for the construction, being
Mhm.
matched by a state grant. So now they're looking at, okay, well, what's it actually gonna
Or they're
cost
still gonna
just?
do the entrance and.
No, they're not doing the
Right,
entrance
so
right
that's
now,
why
they're
it's a
just doing,
different scope.
his plan, what he told me was that they're just, he needs that bathroom, the park needs that
Right.
facility, and, he wants to just do what's necessary to get it running again, and.
So he wants to
this-
reduce the scope without completely pulling
He
the
would like,
project off
yes.
the table and.
He would like to
start from
just
scratch.
reduce the scope and reduce the dollar amount.
Yeah, and instead of the entrance, use that money that's already been.
The only thing he has to do, if the CPA funding request isn't changing at all, which I think it might,
It would, I have no idea what, he hasn't given me anything more than.
have him reapply, start over. That's the best way to do it. Reapply, we could we've already seen the project, so it's not like we have to have it. We could vote on it in May, when it's, you know, he comes in April, does his thing, we vote on it in May, he'll have the money for June. If the council's okay with it. But I also think he should write a letter requesting that the previous application be removed. That's my opinion, I think it has to be.
He could submit an amended application, essentially, saying, you know, the grant didn't go through, and therefore I'm revising the scope. I mean,
If the appropriation, we've already appropriated funds from the city council. The appropriation is changing, I believe, and I'll ask Melissa, but I think we have to get that appropriation removed
I
and then
agree.
ask a new one.
I agree. I mean, the whole process of approval has to change because the project scope and everything is changed. But whether,
Well, a new
Well, that means-
application doesn't
yeah.
mean,
it's
doesn't-
effectively a new application either way.
No, so he
you
could just
know.
rewrite it, same thing he did before, only write it just as the building, okay? What? Is that okay with you?
He's not here.
No, I'm asking him to do that,
Okay.
because I think, and then we have to remove the old one. I have nothing else on the agenda, right? Anybody have anything else? So just to review, we're gonna have Mr. Ford here, we're gonna decide on that. We are gonna decide on Echo Dale, and we'll have John Mason give us the new application next meeting for his project.
Do you want to talk to him? Or do you want me to?
Just tell him what we said.
I'll do the rest of the game.
Well, it has to start over. Just to be safe. If he wants to talk to me, he can. Anything else, guys?
Good.
Anybody want to be on the Historic Commission?
I do.
Anybody want to join John on the Historic Commission?
You're on.
You mean a real one?
That's sad.
You shut off the recording?
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.